It's a quiet evening on the city streets, and two police officers are patrolling their usual route. Officer Daniels, a seasoned veteran with a sharp eye, and Officer Miller, the enthusiastic rookie eager to prove himself, are ready for another routine shift. Also, they think. As they pull over a sleek black car for what seems like a minor traffic infraction, the tension in the air shifts. The man behind the wheel isn't just anyone. He's calm, too calm, as he hands over his license. Then it hits them. This isn't a random driver. It's the head of internal affairs, the man known for investigating every officer in the department. Daniels and Miller exchange uneasy glances. What started as a simple stop now feels like walking into a trap. Questions race through their minds. Why is he here? Is this some sort of test? Or worse, could he be hiding something? The head of internal affairs remains composed, but his every word and movement carry a weight that makes the officers question their every action. What should they do? Stick to protocol or follow their instincts? As the tension builds, an unexpected twist leaves both officers questioning not just the situation, but their trust in the system. What happens next will change everything. Stay tuned. This is a story you don't want to miss. Officer Daniels grips his flashlight tighter, his years of experience telling him that something feels off. He takes a step closer to the car, peering inside, while Miller hangs back, nervously checking his body cam to make sure it's recording. The man in the driver's seat remains calm, his polished demeanor unshaken. Is there a problem, officers? His voice is steady, with just a hint of authority. Daniels clears his throat. Just a routine check, sir. License and registration, please. The head of internal affairs, a man they've only seen in department meetings or heard about in whispered conversations, hands over the documents without hesitation. His name, Robert Whittaker, glints in bold letters on his ID. Miller whispers, "Do you think he's testing us?" Like one of those integrity stings. Daniels doesn't respond. His focus is on Whittaker, who now leans slightly forward, a shadow of a smirk on his face. But then something catches Daniels' eye. A folder sitting on the passenger seat, unmarked, thick, and full of papers. Whittaker notices his glance and casually slides the folder out of view. Daniels' gut tightens. That's no ordinary file. The tension in the air is electric. Whittaker's calm feels calculated, almost daring them to push further. But what if pushing is exactly what they're not supposed to do? Daniels steps back from the car, his mind racing. Every instinct tells him this isn't just another traffic stop. Miller shifts nervously beside him, his hands fidgeting at his belt. "What's the plan, Daniels?" he whispers, trying to keep his voice low. But before Daniels can answer, Whittaker rolls down the window further. "Is there an issue with my documents?" he asks, his tone smooth, almost amused. Daniels forces himself to stay calm. "No issue, Mr. Whittaker. Just need a moment to verify everything." He turns toward Miller, signaling him to run the license through their system. Miller hesitates, glancing back at the car. "You really think he's up to something?" he asks, his voice barely audible. Daniels doesn't respond. His gut says yes, but this is Whittaker. If they're wrong, it could cost them their badges. As Miller heads to the squad car, Daniels stays by Whittaker's window, trying to act casual. "Late night?" he asks, hoping to draw something out. Whittaker smiles faintly. "You could say that. Long meetings, lots of paperwork." His tone is friendly, but Daniels notices his fingers tapping on the steering wheel, a small crack in his otherwise perfect composure. Miller returns, his face pale. Daniels, his license checks out, but he pauses, swallowing hard. There's a notice, an alert tied to his name. Daniel's heart skips a beat. Whittaker notices the change in their expressions and leans back in his seat. "Something wrong, officers." His calmness feels more unsettling now, as if he knows exactly what they've discovered. Daniels feels the weight of Miller's words settle like a lead blanket. An alert tied to Whittaker. That changes everything. He glances at the man sitting in the driver's seat, still unnervingly composed, and wonders how deep this rabbit hole goes. "What kind of alert?" Daniels mutters, barely loud enough for Miller to hear. Miller hesitates, his voice shaking. It's vague. Just says to proceed with caution and contact the station immediately. Daniels' jaw tightens. Whittaker must sense the shift in their demeanor because his smile fades, replaced with something harder to read. Daniels leans closer to the window. "Mr. Whittaker, we're going to need you to step out of the vehicle." The request hangs heavy in the air, and for the first time, Whittaker's mask of calm slips. He raises an eyebrow. "Step out? On what grounds?" "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," Daniels replies, his voice firm. Whittaker doesn't move. Instead, he glances at the folder now tucked discreetly on the passenger seat. Daniels notices the look and steps closer, blocking Whittaker's view of Miller. "Officer," Whittaker says slowly, "you're making a mistake." His voice is lower now, almost threatening, and Daniels feels the pressure of every decision he's ever made closing in. Miller's hand hovers near his radio, unsure whether to call for backup. The air between the three men feels like it could snap at any moment. Whittaker finally speaks again, his voice cold. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" Daniels doesn't flinch. "That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out." Whittaker locks eyes with Daniels, his calm facade cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of annoyance. Or is it fear? Before Daniels can press in further, Miller speaks up, his voice shaky. "Daniels, there's another alert, just came through." Daniels doesn't break his gaze from Whittaker. "What kind of alert?" he asks, his tone measured. Miller hesitates, glancing nervously between Whittaker and Daniels. "It's classified. Level 3 clearance. It's marked urgent." Whittaker lets out a low chuckle, leaning back in his seat. "You really don't know what you're stepping into, do you?" he says, his tone mocking now. Daniels clenches his jaw. "Step out of the car, now." Whittaker doesn't move, his confidence returning like a tide. "Let me guess," he says, folding his arms. "The alert doesn't tell you much, just enough to scare you. But I'll bet it doesn't mention why I'm out here, does it?" Daniels stays silent, but Miller's unease is palpable. Whittaker leans forward slightly. "You think I'm your problem? There's someone else you should be worrying about right now. Someone who knows you've stopped me." Daniels narrows his eyes, refusing to take the bait. But just then, Miller's radio crackles to life. A voice comes through, urgent, panicked. "Unit 34, be advised. Multiple reports of suspicious activity in your vicinity. Possible hostile surveillance. Proceed with caution." Daniels and Miller exchange a tense glance. Whittaker's smile returns, colder than ever. "I told you," he says quietly. "You're in over your heads." The crackling radio sends a chill through Daniels. He grips his flashlight tighter, scanning the dark streets around them. Miller shifts uneasily, his hand hovering near his holster. "What now?" Miller whispers, his voice barely steady. Daniels doesn't answer. His instincts scream that Whittaker isn't bluffing. Whittaker leans back in his seat, his confidence unnerving. "You've got about 30 seconds before they make their move," he says, his tone casual. Daniels snaps his attention back to him. "Who's they?" he demands. Whittaker doesn't answer directly. Instead, he opens his hands in a slow, deliberate gesture. "You think I'm the one you need to worry about, but I'm the only reason you're not in real trouble yet." Before Daniels can process his words, headlights suddenly flood the street from both ends, trapping their patrol car in the middle. Two unmarked SUVs pull up, their engines rumbling ominously. Daniels' heart pounds as figures step out, their movements precise and deliberate. Whittaker smirks. "Looks like they're early." Daniels steps back, placing a hand on his radio. "Back up now," he barks, his voice cutting through the tense air. But Whittaker raises a hand. "Call it off," he says firmly. "They're not here for me. They're here for what's in that folder." Miller stares, his eyes darting between Whittaker and the advancing figures. "What's in the folder?" he blurts out. Whittaker's expression hardens. "Something I wasn't supposed to uncover. Something bigger than either of you." The figures close in, but to Daniel's shock, they bypass Whittaker entirely, heading straight for the patrol car. Whittaker steps out slowly, hands raised, his smirk gone. "This is where we part ways, officers. You've just stepped into something far above your pay grade." Suddenly, a voice from one of the SUVs booms out. Officers Daniels and Miller stand down. This is a federal matter. A badge flashes, and the tension in the air shifts again. Daniels exchanges a look with Miller. Whittaker walks toward the SUVs, calm as ever, before turning back. "You'll get a report," Whittaker says with a small smile. "But you'll never know the full story. Be grateful for that." As the SUVs disappear into the night, Daniels and Miller are left standing on the empty street, their minds racing. Whatever had just happened, it was bigger than either of them could comprehend, and they knew it wasn't over. Daniels and Miller stood in silence, the distant hum of the SUVs fading into the night. The street was eerily quiet now, as if the chaos had been erased as quickly as it arrived. Miller finally broke the silence. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniels shook his head, his thoughts racing. "We were in the middle of something we weren't supposed to see," he muttered. Whittaker wasn't lying. Whatever was in that folder, it wasn't meant for us, or anyone in the department. Miller glanced at the empty road where the SUVs had disappeared. "Do you think we'll ever find out what it was?" he asked. Daniels looked at him, his expression grim. "Probably not, and maybe that's for the best." They returned to their squad car, the adrenaline finally starting to fade. Miller fidgeted with the radio, his nerves still raw. "Do you think they'll ask us about this?" he asked. Daniels let out a dry laugh. "They'll give us just enough to keep us quiet. Nothing more." As they drove back to the station, the weight of the night lingered. It wasn't just the strange encounter or the folder. It was the realization that their badge didn't mean they knew everything, and sometimes ignorance was the only shield they had. For now, the answers would remain locked away, just like the secrets in that folder. But Daniels and Miller both knew this wouldn't be the last time they faced the shadows.